it me you're looking for? Possibly not. Possibly you're actually looking for somebody who reads their books instead of just makes them into terrifying stacks to torture us all with. But you know, if you like a bit of torture, stay tuned, because that's what's on the horizon. Also, that's the second time that I've started one of my videos with that song, and neither of them have been even vaguely in tune. Hi guys, it's Leanne, and I am here today with a stack of books that is apparently so terrifying that my voice now breaks like a teenage boy. You're thoroughly welcome for whatever that was. My last video featuring a horrifying list was my 2021 You Must Read These or Else list. It was a list of 10 books that I absolutely must get to by the end of the year, or I don't know, I'm just gonna cancel myself from the internet. I'm upping the threats for that video literally every time I talk about it. And it's funny because you would actually think that maybe it was just like length or hype that would scare me out of reading these books, but no, there is a huge variety of reasons. There are so many reasons to be scared. Told me. The first book on this list I am terrified of because of serendipity, which granted seems like an odd reason to be afraid of a book, being as serendipity literally means a confluence of events in which everything is perfect. But that very serendipity that led me to this book has also meant that I have put a ridiculous amount of expectations on it, and now if it's not good, I think I will break my heart. That book is Harmony by Carolyn Pankhurst, and it's funny because I wouldn't think that I would be breaking my heart over something which it has one foot in literary fiction and one foot in psychological thriller, but apparently here we are. Year 2 of lockdown, surviving, not thriving. So I came across this book a few years ago. I was not in a good place, and I took myself out to a bookshop in the days where we could still do that, and I rewarded myself with a, you can buy anything that you want today. Absolutely anything that you want. I looked at the cover, I read the blurb, and I was like, that's coming home with me. And even now I have not checked the Goodreads ratings, so they might be awful. This book is about the Hammond family and their eldest daughter Tilly, who has recently been diagnosed as having autism. Her behaviour is now completely out of control, and they feel like their family is being torn apart from the inside. And there's a really nice question in the blurb that I liked, like a floating question, about whether it's the parents' perception that her behaviour is actually that bad, or whether it's actually their behaviour towards Tilly that isn't great. Either way, they decide that the medical system is completely letting them down, and they sign up to go to a radical camp called Camp Harmony in the middle of the woods in New Hampshire, which is completely unlisted and off the grid because it is a camp that promises that it will fix Tilly and all of her problems. The story is then told in alternate chapters from the youngest daughter in the family, Iris, and from the mother of the family, who have both realised that this camp is not exactly what all of them were promised. Look, just humour me, okay? I know that I'm weird and I have a weird amount of investment in this book, okay? Next up, we have a book that has not only been hit by the hype train, the hype train has actually like tied this book to the tracks and then run over it and reversed on it like several times. This is a book that I found out about before it was as popular as it was, and so I purchased it with like full intentions to read it immediately, and then I saw how many people were talking about it on BookTube, and then I saw how many people on BookTube really liked it, and then I went, nah. It can stay on the shelf. It's fine. You guys know how I feel about books that have been run over by the hype train. It either makes my brain just completely turn off, or mysteriously occasionally it makes my brain go, I will read that and only that. That book is, of course, My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This is about Vanessa Y. When she was a young girl and in school, she had an affair with one of her teachers. In her mind, it was completely consensual. They had a relationship and they loved each other, and they still keep in contact even now. But in the wake of the Me Too movement, Vanessa starts to question a few of the things that she thought she absolutely knew about this relationship, and she comes to realise that perhaps it was not entirely consensual at all. This book then delves into what happens if you go from having the greatest love story of your life to being just another victim. It's dark, it's twisty, and it's entirely up my alley. I just can't make myself pick it up. I also apparently can't make the sun stay out. That is apparently not in my powers at present. The next book that I have here is a survivor of my literary fiction clear out. I mean, I'm not just clearing out my literary fiction section, I am also clearing out all of these shelves. I am in the middle of ripping them apart. Yes, I plan on filming the whole process and have indeed already started. And the regrets, oh, The regrets have also already started. My criteria for cleaning out my literary fiction collection was clear. I was only allowed to keep books from it if I loved them and if I was going to reread them at some point in the future, or if I hadn't read them and I did actually plan to read them. So apparently, according to my brain, I do plan to read this one at some point in the future, but I just don't know when. Because this is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry, and it is yet another book that is as big as my head. I mean, that's really the reason that this one's on this list, more than anything else. It's a doorstop. And to be honest, I can't exactly put my finger on the reason that this one survived the cull, because there's so little information on the back of it. It simply says that Lonesome Dove is the grandest novel ever written about the last defiant wilderness of America. Journey to the dusty little Texas town of Lonesome Dove and meet an unforgettable assortment of heroes and outlaws, whores and ladies, Indians and settlers. Richly authentic, beautifully written, always dramatic, Lonesome Dove is a book to make us laugh, weep, dream and remember. And I can see you all sitting there now like, a Western, Leanne? Really? But this girl was brought up on John Wayne. Literally brought up on John Wayne. It was all that I ever watched when I was at my grandparents' house. Everybody on my Goodreads has given this 4 or 5 stars. Nothing below. There is not one bad review that I can find of this book. And I guess for all of those reasons, it has stayed on my shelf. Although it does now find itself on this list of who the hell knows when I'll get to it. So, you know, it's not all positives. Next up, I have a book that I am intimidated by simply because I started it and I hated it. So this is Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Laurie Gottlieb. And my issue with this is not the book, but the narrator. I started listening to this on audiobook and I absolutely hated it. I can't remember who the narrator was. It may even have been Laurie Gottlieb herself. But either way, I felt like the narration was just not taking me anywhere. It was really flat, it was really methodical. It was very much reading the words that were on the page, but with no actual emotion behind them. I didn't feel anything when I listened to the narrator. And that's a problem, because this is a memoir. So Laurie Gottlieb is a therapist herself. She spends all day counselling people about the problems in their lives. And then one day her husband of very many years ups and walks out. He tells her quite simply that he doesn't want to be a father anymore, despite the fact that when he met her, when she had a very small child, he agreed that that child was not a problem, that he was quite happy to be a father to that child. And now, all these years later, apparently that's not true anymore, and Laurie finds herself questioning all of the years that they've spent together and questioning how certain she was about this relationship. And quite simply, Laurie finds herself in need of some therapy. So she ends up being a therapist in therapy. And this book tells the story of her trying to navigate that, trying to provide support for people whilst also finding that she needs support herself. And so I picked this one up in physical format, and now it sits on my shelf and looks at me like, well, you bought me twice, so you should probably try me again. And then I sit there like, well, I've bought you twice. I don't know if I want to try you again. And it's a very vicious circle that we're in. Maybe this book and I need therapy. Maybe we need therapy together. Next up, I have a somewhat ironic one, being as I am wearing this t-shirt. I maybe should have thought a little more about my outfit coordination. This book is a sci-fi book, and I am intimidated about it because loads of people are intimidated about it, because it's a fairly weird premise and the narration is fairly weird, and it's a pretty hard sci-fi book. Like, I love sci-fi, I absolutely adore it, but I stay away from the kind that makes me think about quantum physics and maths. And this one suggests that it might have one foot in that. This is Ancillary Justice by Leckie, and I may be doing it a complete disservice. It may not actually be difficult to read, it might not actually be that weird in narration, and the maths might not be, you know, that much, but in my head it is. Those are the things that when I've heard people talk about this novel, I have absorbed the most. And those are the things that I see when I look at it on the shelf the most. When I stare at it on my shelf and think about picking it up, that's all I see. This book is about Breck. At the beginning of this novel, she wakes up face down in the snow with no idea who she is. And then slowly everything comes back to her. Breck is now left in a frail human body, but she used to be an entire spaceship until she was blown out of the sky and destroyed. Now, stuck with this frail human body, she is also stuck with the idea of revenge. She is going to find the people who blew her out of the sky, and she is going to do horrible things to them. I mean, everything about that premise says that it's a book that I shall love, but I cannot get over the head gremlins enough to pick it up. Next up, I have a book that I'm scared to read, not in case I hate it, but in case I'm just about it. Because not only do I have incredibly high expectations for this book, are we seeing a pattern here, but it is also the favourite of several of my friends. In particular, it is one of the dazzling favourites of Victoria from What Victoria Read. And you know, she's encouraged me gently to pick it up. She keeps telling me that it will be exactly my thing, but something in my brain is like, oh, are we sure though? And that book is of course The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. Now, I actually owned this on my Kindle before I picked up this copy last year, but I never wanted to read it because it had this really awful cover. And I know it's on my Kindle. I'm only going to see the cover when I click on it for the first page. But, you know, your girl is occasionally very shallow and I just couldn't get past it, okay? So then I thought I'll pick up this edition because it's absolutely stunning. It's beautiful in every way. Here's a close-up. It's exactly the kind of illustration that I like. It's exactly the kind of illustration that I do. And I was like, I'm deeply, deeply called to you now. And then I put it on my shelf. And I went back to being afraid of it. The other interesting thing about this book is that it also has an adaptation which I'm absolutely desperate to watch because it has this wonderful woman in it. But I can't watch it until I've read the book, so we're just stuck in this endless merry-go-round. This book is about Angelfield House. It now stands pretty dusty and nasty and forgotten, but it used to contain the March family, who were full of enigmatic people who are not exactly the nicest people in the world. Years and years on, Margaret Leah, who is an investigative journalist, is now trying to look into Angelfield's past. She wants to know why it now stands as a derelict ruin, and she also wants to know exactly what the March family had to do with the enigmatic and very, very reclusive writer Vida Winter. And of course, Margaret has got some problems of her own, which may or may not have something to do with Angelfield House. I mean, it does. It sounds like a perfectly Leanne book, right? Is there such a thing as an aversion to things that are good for you? Because if there is, I think I have it. Next on this list, I have another very, very popular sci-fi book. Apparently, sci-fi books are making my anxiety cut right now. They're not making the cut of my happy books, just the anxiety-inducing ones. Yes. And I know the reason that I find this one particularly anxiety-inducing is absolutely nothing to do with the writing or the following that this author has, and absolutely everything to do with the plot. This is Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky, and it is a world in which Earth is dead. Dead and dying. Dead, 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 dead. We have killed it and now we have to leave, and it's completely our own fault. And I think thinking about that right now is scaring me more than anything else and making me just nope my way out, like with extreme prejudice. Nope with extreme prejudice. In this world where we have killed Earth, we have also terraformed a distant planet somewhere out in the stars where there are a couple of surviving maps to show us the way. We have terraformed somewhere for this very eventuality when we eventually, you know, killed Earth by using up all of its resources. So now the last group of survivors from Earth have to get into spaceships and use these really old maps to find their way to this new planet. But the thing is, this new planet has just been sitting there with all this infrastructure on it for all this time, and we're just expecting to be able to like walk into it and be like, honey, I'm home. And instead, somebody else who was in need of it has come along and said, oh look, an entirely new terraformed planet with industrial stuff on it. I will have that. And so when we get to our new home, there's actually already people living there. And so we do exactly what we do as people from Earth, and apparently we start a war. And in fairness to this book, it's actually an exploration into that. It's an exploration into the concept about why we would do that and what as humans makes us entitled, and also like exciting space adventure of like we have nowhere to live and must find ourselves a new place. It is also completely terrifying and very triggering, and I don't know if it's even staying on this list or in my house. What do you guys think? Will I actually love this book, or should I just accept that it triggers me too much and get rid of it? Please tell me what you think. Yes. Second from last on my list is a book that exists on my Kindle, and thus I am able to ignore it from the vantage point of, you know, just not looking at it, not having it stare me in the face behind me in my library whenever I walk in. A very convenient place of ignorance that I find myself in. That book is One to Watch by Kate Stayman-London. It's a fairly new, as in it came out at the tail end of 2020, contemporary romance novel, and thus it really shouldn't be as intimidating as, you know, like sci-fi where Earth dies, but for some reason it just is. In this book we have Bea, and she is a plus size blogger, and she has for many years watched a dating show quite similar to The Bachelor, in which very pretty skinny blonde women meet very buff traditionally attractive men and they make apparent love matches. And Bea has been very outspoken on her very popular blog about the fact that she thinks this is all completely fake and that this show never shows any kind of diversity whatsoever. The show then finds out that Bea has written this article, and to try and save face they invite her to be one of the participants on the newest season, and Bea goes in there thinking that she is going to completely expose this show for being the like discrimination factory that it really is, and that she's not going to fall in love with anybody. And then she does, because of course, because it's a contemporary romance novel, and you know, like, what would be the point if she didn't? Literally everybody who I know who has read this has absolutely loved it. Like, it has a cult-like following now. In the few months that it has been out, it has so many devoted fans, and I am now like... It's funny that quite a few of the books on this list, like My Dark Vanessa and One to Watch, are books that I found myself before I saw that everybody else was reading them. I had picked up One to Watch on an ebook deal and I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know that it was such an anticipated release. I bought it blind. And now I'm in this chiz where I'm like, but I want to love it, but my expectations are so high. There's definitely also a theme of that in this video, right? Like, really unrealistically high expectations. Am I broken? Possibly. Possibly I am completely broken. And now the final book on this list. It is a casualty of being a standalone, which I very much anticipated from one of my favourite authors who wrote one of my favourite books in the entire world. This is The Alibi Girl by C.J. Skuse, and C.J. Skuse of course wrote Sweetpea, which is a book that I just think that if you like any kind of psychological thriller and you like any kind of dark humour in your books, then you need to read. I was just so deeply devoted to that book for so many years after I read it that I talked about it to the point where I was like, I can no longer talk about it on my channel or a podcast or anywhere else because everybody is totally sick of hearing about it. And then she went and brought out this, which is a standalone novel. It's nothing to do with the Sweetpea series. It is all about a girl who is forced to remember all of the lies that she has ever told. This is about Joanne, and Joanne isn't Joanne's real name because Joanne is on the run from something really terrible in her past. So every day, throughout her whole day, she pretends to be different people. Whenever she meets anybody, she comes up with a completely different backstory for herself, from a best-selling romance novelist to a random pregnant lady in the dental surgery. Everywhere she goes, she tells a lie, but she's forced to try and remember all of those lies in case she ever bumps into any of those people ever again. And meanwhile, she has to stay on the run, stay undetected, and stay unseen. But she's starting to not be able to remember who she actually is herself. All of this sounds amazing. It sounds like the kind of psychological thriller that I really love, and also I love witness protection as a trope. I love having to completely abandon your entire life and move somewhere else. It's very like Stillhouse Lake, but with a side of like Dexter's kind of humour. But for some reason I cannot make myself pick it up, and I think it's because Sweetpea is such a huge book in my head. I love Rhiannon so much. I love the world that C.J. Skuse has created for Rhiannon. It's so deeply embedded in my head. I just can't pick it up in case I hate it, because in my head I'm like, but I can't hate anything from C.J. Skuse because that would just be sacrilege. And it's so dumb, but I can't stop my brain from doing it. Yay me. So that's it, folks. That's the list of books that I am not picking up for completely stupid and yet thoroughly intimidating reasons. Those are all of the books that I look at and I think, yeah, probably, but also nah. Probably not. No, but I'm not getting rid of them. They're not going on the unhaul pile, just in case. Just in case it's perfectly legitimate, right? just in case. Do let me know if you have read any of the books that are on this list and whether you think that I should just get over myself and bump them up to my actual TBR instead of my I might never get to these ever but they're going to stay on my shelf TBR. Please soothe my soul and tell me that they're not intimidating, or just trash this TBR entirely and tell me that I should get rid of like great big swaths of these books. Either way I will be happy because you will be making my decisions for me. I should probably do that. I should probably say that in your comment, regardless of what else you tell me, vote for one of these books. Which one of these should I absolutely, definitely, 100% stop putting off reading in 2021? Which one? You tell me. You tell me in the comments. As always, if you would like more of my confusion and ridiculous anxiety, please consider subscribing to my channel and hitting the little bell icon so you can know when I've come to be anxious in your feed. And if you enjoyed this particular variety of neurosis, give this video a thumbs up and I will see you all very soon, guys. Bye! You know, the benefit of ripping my shelves apart is that I could just not put these back on my shelves. I could put them in a cupboard and just never look at them again. Like they would be in a cupboard, but I wouldn't know they were there, right?